Hi, this is Dr. Rhonda Felheim. We're going to start getting acquainted with the lymphatic system. Just a reminder, we talked about what happens at the capillary bed and the fact that we have a lot of fluid and its solute movements out of the capillaries and then back into the capillaries, but that there's a quantity that gets left out in the interstitial fluid. This is inside a capillary, and I just wanted to draw attention. This is so amazing to me when we can actually see these things. These are the little fenestrations, the little openings within the capillary wall where our fluid and solutes, due to net pressures, either in or out, the fluids will move as a result of that. And you can see that only the fluid and very, very small solutes are going to make it. These are all formed elements, and there's no way that they're going to fit through those holes. So that's where we're getting this fluid out in the interstitial fluid. Again, as we know, that all of it returns to the capillaries on the venous end of the bed, except for about 3 liters of this fluid that came out of the capillaries over here is going to still remain among the cells. See these cells out here, this interstitial fluid. Okay, so the green depicts our lymphatic capillaries, and you can see where they're positioned right in the mix. And these are closed-end capillaries, which means that they're going to pick up the lymph fluid, and this is where the journey for the lymph will begin. And to say lymph fluid is kind of redundant because lymph is fluid. So the journey begins here as far as the transportation of lymph. And I'm going to set up kind of a cliffhanger here. You don't really know where the lymph is going yet, do you, or what's going to happen to it? We'll get there. So we know then that one of the functions of the lymphatic system is to recover the fluid in the interstitial area and any very small plasma proteins that may have made their way through those very small holes. Another function of the lymphatic system is that any lipids, any fats that we consume in our diet are actually absorbed through the cells that line the small intestines. And instead of going directly into our blood, they actually go into very specialized lymphatic capillaries. So we're going to take a look at that as well. And then this is so interesting and so amazing and exciting. Our immunity is tied to the lymphatic system, and the connection there is huge. And so as we talk about the lymphatic system, please keep in mind that the lymphatic system is the stage on which immunity is played out. It is the stage, okay? So let's look at the overall components of the lymphatic system. Well, we have lymph, and again, as I may have said previously, not in this discussion, but lymph is the fluid that was in the interstitial areas. So it's that whole location thing. When this fluid with its solutes is in a capillary, we call it plasma. When it's in among cells outside the capillary, we call it interstitial fluid. But when it's in lymphatic vessels, we call it lymph. Okay, so essentially, if you think about it, it's the same fluid, it's just in different places. Okay, lymphatic vessels, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about lymphatic cells, lymph nodes, tonsils, spleen, red bone marrow, and the thymus. Okay, so let's look at the vessels first. Again, this is just our capillary bed of lymphatic capillaries. And if we look at one individual, again, closed end, but it has all these little slit kind of openings where lymph can flow in but not out. All right, these lymphatic capillaries are very much like their structure is very similar to the venous system. You can see they have valves. Okay, so veins have valves, so do lymphatic vessels, and it's only going to allow the flow of lymph to go in one direction. One direction. Okay, so this is a good time, I guess. This is, I don't know when else to introduce this specialized lymphatic capillary called a lacteal. Now you'll only find lacteals associated with the mucosa of the small intestines. And as I said, that when we consume fatty foods, the fats are broken down and actually absorbed across the wall of the small intestine, and they will then go into these specialized lymphatic capillaries called lacteals. Okay, so the fat that we consume will go into lacteals, and I just wanted to introduce that term now. In lab you will see more clearly what the lacteal is, but that's just a brief introduction. Okay, so let's look at lymphatic vessels. Let's look at the flow of lymph through these vessels. Well, the green on this diagram depicts our lymphatic vessels, and we know that they're the capillary level we can't see, so that's there as well. But all of the lymph is going to, as it's picked up from the tissues, is going to flow back towards the subclavian veins, and that's why you see the veins visible here. Okay, subclavian veins, and so it's all going to flow in that direction, meaning that the lymph that's picked up out here at your big toe, either big toe, is going to come up in this direction. Now, I'm going to take that off for a second because I want to show you that what happens right here is all the flow of lymph coming from the lower extremities and from the gut is eventually going to end up passing through this structure right here, and it's just a hollow structure called the cisterna chyli. The cisterna chyli, and this sort of blends the lymph from all over the lower extremity, as you can see. So it's all going to come up in this direction through the cisterna chyli, and again, not only from the legs all the way up, but the gut will join it there as well, any lymph from the gut. And then from there, now watch carefully, all of this lymph is going to go into the left subclavian vein via, or as en route of, what we call the thoracic duct. So all of these structures, including the left upper extremity and the left side of the head, will drain into the thoracic duct. But again, this lymph is all flowing in one direction. That's its journey. That's its journey. And again, all this lymph is being dumped into venous blood right here, which means it's going to go right into the heart. All right. So we will learn as we go what happens to that lymph on its journey. That's what's key. That's really what's important to understanding, is what's happening to the lymph as it journeys towards the subclavian vein. So that was this portion of the body, drainage. And if we look at the drainage of this very small area on the right upper quadrant we call it, not to be confused with right upper quadrant of the abdominal region, but okay, so right upper quarter, let's say that, right upper quarter. You can see that the right side of the head, thoracic region, and right arm drain a little bit differently. They will ultimately drain into what we call the right lymphatic duct, which will then deposit the lymph in the right subclavian vein. So the thoracic duct drains all of this into the into the left subclavian vein, and the right lymphatic duct just drains this portion into the right lymphatic duct, okay, into the right subclavian vein. All right, let's take a look at lymphatic cells. Lymphatic cells. Okay, these are the lymphatic cells. These are what we call them, consider lymphatic cells. These would be our natural killer cells, T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes. We're going to become very intimate with them. Our knowledge of them, we'll know them really well. You will be one with lymphocytes. Macrophages, you know what those are, phagocytes. Dendritic cells, give some thought to where you have heard of dendritic cells before. Okay, and where their location is going to be really important to their function. And reticular cells, we know reticular cells, we primarily find those in abundance in soft organs. Okay, so these will be the key players as we talk about the lymphatic system. When we talk about the lymphatic system, we sort of break it out into our lymphatic organs, which I've listed over here, and our diffuse lymphatic tissue. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to explain what diffuse lymphatic tissue is to you, and then the lymphatic organs will primarily be addressed in the lab setting. So let's talk about diffuse lymphatic tissue. You can see we have MALT, and then we have nodules. So just the word diffuse should give you some idea of where this tissue is that we're talking about. Diffuse kind of means, spread out all over the place, in lots of different areas, in not a consistent quantity. So when we talk about either of these, the MALT or nodules, that's really consistent with diffuse. Okay, so mucosa-associated lymphatic tissue then that's what the MALT stands for. Literally what we're talking about is just under the mucosa. So we know that mucosa is what? The epithelium, right? Okay, so we'll talk the talk. Epithelium. And just under the epithelium there's going to be a connective tissue layer that contains a lot of scattered lymphocytes and macrophages, because we said lymphatic cells are, the macrophages, the lymphocytes. So I'm going to say that a lot. And so when we talk about MALT, what we're talking about is in this connective tissue layer, just under the epithelium, or under the mucosa, you will find lots of lymphocytes and macrophages. Well, that's what we consider MALT, just scattered all over. But if you have a cluster of those lymphocytes and macrophages like this, without a capsule around them, then we call it a nodule. We are still in the same tissue. You can see how this is sitting just under the epithelial layer, just waiting for something to come in contact with that layer that shouldn't be there, because we know that macrophages are going to go after anything that doesn't belong. So that's what we consider to be diffuse lymphatic tissue. And again, we have that throughout our system, throughout our entire body, under the mucosal layers. Now, the lymphatic organs, I'm going to stop here because these are primarily going to be addressed within the lab setting.